Hey everyone, it's Michael from Chess Lifestyle. And if you are not hiding under a rock, you will know that there was some quite big chess drama in the chess world today. And I basically wanted to share my views on it. And I think it's very important, especially for players that aren't as competitive as I am or don't really know the competitive scene of chess too well, to have more of an informed opinion on the situation. Because basically, social media is kicking off, like all these newspapers are kicking off, and you're going to hear all kinds of, um, opinions. And I just want to set the facts straight, right? So to summarize what has happened, basically today, Magnus Carlsen was playing in the Qatar Masters. And for those that don't know, the Qatar Masters is a strong open tournament, but it does have a rating requirement of 2300 FIDE. So 2300 FIDE is an FM level and above, and a strong FM. So yeah, basically it's a strong tournament, and Magnus Carlsen entered said tournament. Now, Magnus played a great game round one and won convincingly, and round two, that was a very surprise result because I'm gonna butcher his name, but Alisher Suleimanov from Kazakhstan, actually a player I haven't heard of before. He seems like a promising junior. Managed to beat Magnus, and not just beat him, but completely crush him. Now, of course, when you hear the world champion, a 28-39, losing and getting crushed by a 2500, maybe you start to have some suspicions that there could be some, dodginess going on, right? But the thing is, in actual fact, this kind of, point difference between two players and losing a game with the black pieces is not completely unreasonable to believe. I mean, Magnus made a couple blunders, mistakes back to back that led White to have a very forcing continuation and attack, and he ended up executing the attack brilliantly. And to me, I don't think that the game was suspicious at all. I think White played a great game, and Magnus has said this himself, right? Like he said himself that his opponent played an amazing game, right? So what is the problem? Well, the problem is that what Magnus tweeted about was that, I'll read it out. He said, "I did ask an arbiter during the game whether watches were allowed, and he clarified that smart watches were banned, but not analog watches. This seems to be against FIDE rules for events of this stature." Now, okay, in fairness, I mean, I've done my FIDE arbiter exam, so I know like reasonable amount of what I'm talking about. I haven't looked specifically what the FIDE law says about watches. I definitely know that digital watches are 100% banned, but to my knowledge, I actually don't think that watches are banned because it's completely unreasonable to ask someone not to wear an analog watch. I mean, in male fashion, like guys, I don't wear watches, but a lot of guys like to wear a nice watch, right? And for chess players, an analog watch should be completely fair. It's as if wearing a piece of jewelry, right? Because, an analog watch is not digital, it's not electronic. For people who don't know, to cheat in chess, the idea is that if you have a smartwatch, you could potentially load a version of Stockfish, which is like a free engine that people can get anywhere online. They might be able to load it onto the watch, and using that watch, they can go to the bathroom, check a few moves with this very, very strong engine that is stronger than even the strongest player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, and therefore beat a player like Magnus Carlsen. But an analog watch can't do anything. It just shows the time. So for Magnus to make a tweet that, he felt uncomfortable about his opponent wearing an analog watch, this is very strange. Because for sure, Magnus, I guarantee, will have played many opponents who have worn analog watches. But because this opponent beat him, and this opponent is only a 2500, who's not worthy of beating such a player like Magnus, he starts writing these tweets, and okay, in his second tweet, in fairness to him, he is clarifying that this is not to accuse my opponent of anything, but by suggesting that he is wearing an analog watch and this shouldn't have been allowed, this is suggesting that maybe Alisher won the game not through completely fair means. I mean, it's implied. Like, no matter whether he says, oh, I'm not accusing, it's kind of like saying an insult to someone and they say, oh, but no offense. Like, no, you did just offend that person. It's just the same. Like, he's implying that there may have been some foul play. And Magnus really should start taking accountability for these tweets because it actually is damaging the game. Because a lot of people, like honestly, after the Hans Niemann drama, like, talking to friends of mine who don't know anything about chess, they suddenly want to chime in on the situation and their opinion is completely flawed and broken because all they have to go on is what mainstream media is reporting, like the BBC, newspapers. I'm not even talking about trashy tabloids. I'm talking about newspapers such as The Independent, right? Read this headline that was posted 1 hour ago. Magnus Carlsen blames chess opponent's accessory for loss in anti-cheating rant. That suggests, I mean, anyone who's not like a chess player who reads that will suddenly think, oh wow, competitive chess is just ridden with cheaters. Poor Magnus for, having to deal with these, players who are like cheating to beat him. Bro, he had an analog watch. There's nothing wrong with that. It's completely unreasonable. And Alisher is going to, experience a storm of, these, Magnus lovers. And there are people on Twitter, I don't mean to call out the chessneck individually. I mean, I actually follow the guy and I like a lot of his tweets. But he wrote, for instance, call me crazy, but the Magnus Carlsen watch complaint seems reasonable to me. He didn't diminish his opponent's game and didn't make excuses for losing. And what I had to say to that is, if you lose a classical game and your first point of action is to complain about the analog watch they were wearing, this is clearly an excuse for losing and a suggestion that the analog watch could have been used for cheating. This suspicion puts Alisher in a worse light. And the problem is, there are so many Magnus fans that don't see this simple logic that they will stand by Magnus through everything. I don't know what to say. So basically, I think this also puts into context a bit for poor Hans, who had to deal with this the first time round. And this is a repeat behavior from Magnus. Magnus will lose a game and he will look for something or someone to blame. Unless he's losing to someone he deems worthy of losing to, he will kick up a storm. And the thing is, other players also lose to lower rated players. For instance, a very famous player, and if you haven't heard of him, then you should look up his games and, learn about him because he's an extremely famous player and a very strong player, is Fedoseev. And if you can see at the bottom of the screen here, Fedoseev playing in this Qatar Masters, he is on 0 out of 2, having lost to a 2400 and a 2200. Is he on Twitter kicking up a storm about how his opponents cheated? No. In chess, you have opponents who play a great game. You have opponents who are underrated. A 2300 doesn't mean that they lose every game to a 2700. Often they will. And it's very unfortunate and unlucky, perhaps, that Fedoseev has lost both of his first 2 round games. But he is not turning to the world to suggest, oh, but my opponent was wearing an analog watch. No, you are implying something negative. The media, and I'm not just talking about trashy tabloid, I'm talking about mainstream media, all respectable sources are going to pick up on this in a bad light. And this is just unfair to the player who is victimized, and it is unfair to the chess community who have to deal with the repercussions of everyone believing that, competitive chess is a mess and ridden with cheaters. And yeah, it's just frankly ridiculous. So I felt like I had to, make this very clear point. And, if anyone has any views on the other side of a table, I would love to hear them. Because honestly, when I see it, I really can't see it any other way. If you start complaining about analog clocks that your opponent's wearing, honestly, you're a joke. I'm sorry, but you can be salty about losing, but to then bring your opponent down is just such a low blow. And such a crappy thing to do from the former world champion and still the best player in the world. I don't know how he can get away with this. And I mean, I'm honestly glad that Hans received some compensation for all of the mess he had to go through. And it's also, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, Hans is also doing like some great stuff. Like he set up this scholarship for juniors to get coaching from him as well as money to support their chess careers. He's actually trying to make positive change in this chess world. And here Magnus is losing some game to some talented junior and then bring them down. Like it's honestly, yeah, it's honestly not fair. And yeah, this has to be said. So yeah, would love to hear your comments below, and we can spark some kind of discussion. But yeah, this has to be said.